Hello everyone, welcome to another Fara carrier video. Today we're going to talk about some upcoming changes that have been announced on the World of Warships dev blog on Facebook. So we've got two changes that are up and coming that we want to talk about today, so let's go straight into it with number one. Here we can see that there's a bunch of changes, but ultimately what we're interested in at the very bottom is a visibility of torpedoes, of all torpedoes, from planes is decreased twofold. This change will increase the gameplay comfort of destroyers that focus on torpedo damage. What does this mean? It means that battleships that do a catapult plane or a spotter plane or any of those type of things, including cruisers, will have a harder time seeing destroyers, but more importantly, anyone who plays an aircraft carrier here will also have to fly almost on top of torpedoes to see them. So it makes it much harder for CVs to spot torps, especially those fired by destroyers at long range, and you know, for their team assists. Now, what does this mean in random battles? Probably not a great deal. Usually a carrier player will accidentally spot torps rather than deliberately, intentionally go ahead and try and spot them for the team. What does it mean for a competitive scene or perhaps ranked? Probably not much different. The fact is, if you are a person playing support, doing the scouting, you're not going to have the planes loitering whenever. You'll have them waypointed going back and forth. You'll look for channels or bottlenecks, and then just by simply flying over the area, it's irrelevant that the detection range has been reduced. So you would probably find them. If, for example, if there was a destroyer in smoke and you knew there was going to be torpedoes coming out of it, you'd fly around. Or if there's a gap between two set of islands that your ships are possibly going to go through, you would just scout that lane back and forth, and you'd probably spot it. So, is it a good thing for randoms? Yeah, probably. It definitely helps the destroyers with the issue of spotting. Is it a good thing? Does it make a difference for scouting roles as a carrier and ranked competitive? Probably not, no. So, in all around, it's a generally good change. You can see it as a nerf for carriers, it's a little bit harder, but ultimately balances everything a little bit better. Right. Now, that's number one. Let's talk on to the main meat today, number two. If we check down here at the bottom, a few other changes. The American aircraft carrier, Midway, had her hangar limited to 96 planes instead of 136. The ship performed about equally to Hakuryu in shorter battles, but in longer ones, the Japanese rival often had issues because of Midway's larger hangar. Okay, so 40 planes, that's a lot. Well, right now we've got this pre-nerf, 136. 40 planes, you're thinking, wow, they must really hate the Midway. But before you go to quick judging, let's think about the logic of this. How many fighter planes does the Midway have? Well, it has 50 fighters. How many planes does the Hakuryu have? It has 25 fighters in total. So that's a huge capacity difference, right? The issue is, the fighters, the bombers, torpedo bombers for the Midway currently, when I talk full waves, I'm saying a full wave of fighters is 14 fighters. That's 7 and 7. That is one full wave. So currently the Midway has 3.5 full waves. That means 14, 14, 14, and then 1 7. That's huge, considering how the Hakuryu only has 2.5 full waves. Currently the Midway has 3.7 full waves of torpedo bombers. It has got 45 torpedo bombers. So that's a variety of 12 and 12 and 12, and then a smaller number of around 9-ish. That's huge capacity. Compare that to the Hakuryu. The Hakuryu has 38 torpedo bombers, so that is just over 3 waves. So it's 12, 12, 12, and that's about it, and anything left over. And that's assuming you lose the entire wave. So the Midway has massive reserves, but then again, it's got lower tier planes. And currently, the dive bombers, it's got 46 dive bombers, which is also a very large number. It gets just over 3 full waves of that because it's 14, 14, 14, and then you've got a few left over depending how things go. So at the moment, it's got lots of reserves. It's got 3+ full waves, whereas the Hakuryu, it only has 37 dive bombers, and they've only got 2.4 full waves, although you could argue because it's 3 waves of 5, it's 15 in the air. Ultimately, what we're trying to get at here is that the Hakuryu works on about 2.5 for the dive bombers, for the fighter planes, and just about 3 for the torpedo bombers, whereas the current Midway is running 3.5, 3.7, and 3.3, roughly, in terms of full waves. So reducing 40 planes isn't like an arbitrary 40 planes nerf. No, it's more of a, we're going to bring off one full wave of fighters, one full wave of torpedo bombers, and one full wave of dive bombers. Bring that back to roughly the same number as the Hakuryu. And that way it's kind of balancing out. So while Wargaming hasn't mentioned the exact breakdown of the Midway's planes, if you were to take 96 and split it 3 ways, which may not be the final setup, but let's just go with that conservative estimate right now, that means that you would have 32 fighters, 32 torpedo bombers, and 32 dive bombers. Now that can tweak ever so slightly. They may make it so that there's slightly fewer fighters and slightly more bombers, but even if we just take that conservative number, what does that mean? Well, if they have 32 fighters, that means they have 2.2 full waves. 30 planes though, or 32 planes. Just keep in mind though, the Midway, even with 30 or 32 planes or something around that number, it still has more than the Hakuryu's 25. And also remember that the Midway fighters have more ammunition, and you have 14 fighter planes in the air compared to the Hakuryu's 10. So your waves are bigger, and you have more ammunition, and you have more reserves. So even though it's lost like a full wave of like 14 plus fighter planes, does it make a huge difference compared to a Hakuryu that runs 233? Well, no. It doesn't. So you're probably fine. There's very few Hakuryus that run 422, and that's a completely different argument to talk about strike potential. But ultimately, the Midway is still powerful and it's still got air control. If you're talking about the tier 10 dive bombers, between 32 or however many bombers, that's slightly over 2 waves. Well, they're tier 10 planes, they're kind of tanky. You've got roughly the same number of full waves as the Hakuryu, so it's kind of balanced in that sense. But then you come to the awkwardness of how the armor-piercing dive bombs for the Midway don't particularly strike tier 10 battleships that well. So you're relying on either using AP on favourable tier 8 battleships, or you're using the American AP bombs on things like tier 10 cruisers. If you don't use those armor-piercing bombs, well then you're going to use HE, and HE does roughly about the same alpha damage as AP on tier 9-10 battleships, and you get the extra fires, but that's more RNG to it. So to get consistent, reliable high damage, you're going to rely on the torpedo bombers. Now the problem here is that the Midway uses tier 8 torpedo bombers, as we're all aware of. Now that's not really been an issue because you had so many reserves, many waves. Now, if you're talking around anywhere between 30 to 33-ish torpedo bombers, that is about 2.5-ish full waves compared to the Hakuryu's roughly around 3. So the fact is, it would be nice if they tweaked the internal numbers so that's perhaps slightly fewer fighters and so there's more torpedo bombers, but ultimately, whenever Wargaming makes their decision and makes it public on the PTS, we'll find out the exact numbers. But it does mean that the tier 8 torpedo bombers, you're only going to get 2 full guaranteed waves, and then anything that survives is going to form the basis of the 3rd wave. The problem is that when you go after tier 10 AA targets, you typically lose a full wave. Like, for example, if I was going to attack Montana, if I came in perfectly, did the perfect approach, did the perfect attack, if the guy is even remotely spec'd AA, I will get the drop-off, I'll do lots of damage, and I'll absolutely cripple them, but the planes themselves probably won't escape. They'll probably all get shot down. So you are limited to the number of strike waves you can do, whereas in the Hakuryu, for example, because they're tier 10, they're faster, they can get to where they need to be, and they can drop, and typically they can somewhat survive as well, especially since it's 3 waves, and the guy has to click on each plane individually, where 2 waves is easier, because you click on the first wave, and it dies, and you just click on the second wave, you don't have to click on the 3rd one, right? That's for manual fire AA. So is this, is it a nerf? Absolutely, it's totally a nerf. And then the issue is that obviously the Midway, you could recklessly throw away your planes without really having to think too much about it, and you could survive much longer than the Hakuryu could, because the Hakuryu has limited plane capacity in the sense of, especially of fighters. Is this a bad thing? Well, not really, because the Midway has such high capacity that you had to be pretty bad to basically be bled dry in the Midway. So is it going to hurt it in random battles? Not really. It's kind of going to be the same, because by the time that you run out of planes, the game's almost over anyway, and if you're conservative with your planes, you'll be okay. My only hesitation is I don't mind the fact the fighters are still tier 9. It bugs me, but okay, fine, whatever. They're a little bit more slower, and then they have less health for tanking AA, but whatever. There's still more of them than the Hakuryu. I just have reservations about the tier 8 torpedo bombers. I feel that maybe we could make an argument to push them up to tier 9. And then that would give them a little bit more speed, getting from A to B, would make them a little bit tankier, and that would make up for the fact that we have a whole way fewer of them, and that way it keeps it kind of cutting edge. And then that would also mean, in a completely different conversational topic, the Essex could have its bombers move from tier 8 up to tier 9 as well. But that's a different argument. Let's not talk about the Essex right now. And you get the principle. The torpedo bombers are the weak thing. So the number of planes isn't the issue, it's the tiering of the tier torpedo bombers and whether or not by reducing their numbers in particular will reduce the effectiveness of the Midway. And that's to be seen. I have reservations about this, and I wonder how it's going to be in the hands of an average player. But anyway, that is the changes for the Midway. It's up and coming. I think Wargaming's got their mindset on it, and for the most part, it's okay. I mean, the Midway is spiked in power because of the reserves, and this is probably a good thing in terms of the plane reduction. You can see the logic where they're coming from, but I really would like Wargaming to have a look at the tiering of the planes and reevaluate it now that they've reduced the total plane count. Anyway, that's up for now. When we do get full final details of the Midway, we'll break another video, we'll perhaps do some example gameplay with reduced plane numbers to have to play it. But until then, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.